President. Thank you for joining us to our press conference following the formal June European Council. We've just adopted the conclusions on economic issues. President Michel, sorry, you have the floor.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Nous venons de clôturer.
Thank you very much. We have just finished the European Council.
Our first discussion on the emerging European political community. It's not an alternative to enlargement. We sought to frame the idea by addressing three questions. Why? And the idea is to ensure security and stability on the European continent. What? This could take the form of a platform for political dialogue and coordination with our European partners on an equal footing. And who? We think it's best for the format to be for leaders only, and we intend to define later its specific scope. We will have a possible first meeting in Prague under the Czech presidency, and we will prepare together with the French president and the Czech rotating presidency this possible meeting after the summer. Today we had the Euro Summit and we had the occasion to focus on two key points. First, the current economic situation. Inflation is a major concern for all of us. Russia's war of aggression is pushing up the price of energy, food and commodities, and all of this has a direct impact on our citizens and businesses. We are united and we agreed to closely coordinate our economic policy responses. And second topic, our European financial architecture. We remain committed to completing the banking union, and further steps will follow, and the deepening of the capital markets union remains a priority. Nous avons également eu l'occasion.
Also, we had an opportunity to talk again about the progress which has to be made on the energy front, with the firm intention to continue with our efforts to coordinate in this important area, taking into account the work that is being done, starting with the Commission. And finally, two points I would like to mention. A significant step forward has been taken by Croatia, now about to join the euro area. That's an important decision which was endorsed by the European Council. That will be taking place in the coming months, and we'd like to warmly congratulate Croatia, government and people on this decision, which shows how resilient the euro area is. Then finally, on Greece, we had the opportunity to pay tribute to the steps forward made by Greece in terms of ending the surveillance program, which also shows the significant progress that has been achieved. And then there's one thing I'd like to mention still. I'd like to again express our thanks to the French presidency of the European Union. We had an opportunity at the end of the European Council, again, all 27 of us, to congratulate France on the gigantic legislative and political work that has been done in a number of areas, and these efforts will continue because in the coming days, on the Western Balkans in particular, and North Macedonia and Albania, in the light of the vote in the Bulgarian parliament a few hours ago, there's still something to be done. So we'll continue to watch that closely. And again, huge thanks to President and the whole team which was mobilized to make progress on the European project. Then also I have a particular message to the staff, to Pino and Pino, the two Pinos, which might surprise you. But Pino and Pino, you're something of an institution in the council press room. You're known throughout the world.
Et je souhaitais vous remercier.
I'd like to thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and the applause shows how much affection you enjoy from the press. So again, many thanks.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Madam President.
Yes, thank you so much. Indeed, today we had the opportunity to hold an in-depth discussion on the economy during the Euro summit. The euro area is forecast to continue growing both in 22 and 23, although by less than we anticipated before the war. Obviously, the war in Ukraine is having a heavy impact both on growth and on inflation. We've seen Russia's disruptive action on gas, and we're seeing price increases beyond energy on food and elsewhere in the economy. Therefore, we discussed how to mitigate the economic and social impacts, especially on the most vulnerable of our societies. This starts with being adequately prepared to deal with potential further disruptions in deliveries of Russian gas to Europe, and we are working hard on this. We have reviewed all the national emergency plans to help make sure everyone is ready for further disruptions. And we are working on a common European emergency demand reduction plan with industry, but also with the 27 member states. We do this because we've learned our lesson from COVID-19. There we have seen that when we act together as 27, when we avoid fragmentation, we are strong and we have an enormous impact. I will present this plan in July to the leaders. There will not be a return to cheap fossil fuels, I think, and therefore, alongside temporary and targeted support to vulnerable families and businesses, it is essential to help our economies and societies to adapt to the new conditions. The root cause of our problem is our dependence on fossil fuel, which we must get rid of. And this is basically the essence of Repower EU. We are providing through Repower EU resources of around about 300 billion euro to do three things. On one hand, to diversify our energy supply. Second pillar is to increase the energy efficiency. And the third pillar is the supply of our own green renewable energy. And we are already seeing results. If I may give you an example for the first pillar, the diversification away from Russian gas, we see that the US LNG deliveries to the European Union are up by 75% this year compared to last year. We've just done an MOU with Israel, Egypt, and the European Union to make sure that there's natural gas from Israel liquefied in Egypt and then brought via LNG to the European Union. The Norwegian pipeline gas is up 15%, Azerbaijan up by plus 90%. So there's a lot on the move, really to diversify away from the Russian gas to other trustworthy suppliers. Looking at the renewables, I think there's one interesting figure. The European Union was and is the second largest market globally in terms of increased capacity of renewables in 21 and will be in 22. So you also see the big move forward of heavy investment in renewables. That is the energy of the future. That's the way to go. A second topic that we have been discussing is in parallel that we are working on the review of the economic governance. We know that debts and deficits have soared in all member states after COVID. And at the same time, investment needs are very large for a successful transition to green, digital and resilient EU society and economy. And therefore, we need to design rules that, in a way, reconcile these higher investment needs, they are necessary, and at the same time to safeguard sound fiscal finances. The one goes with the other, that is fiscal sustainability and growth. And let me also end, dear Emmanuel, by congratulating you to an extremely successful French presidency. It was colossal, the work you've done. I've witnessed this every day, how intensive your team, and I really want to thank you and your team, has been working on progress in the European Union. It really made a difference. I mean, we should keep in mind that when you started, there was a lot on your plate, but you had no clue that there was a war coming. In record time, we delivered together 6 packages of heavy sanctions. And I think it was a hallmark and a very defining moment to see the determination of the European Union and the speed at which we can move forward. We have in this time welcomed 7.5 million refugees from Ukraine. 3 million are still here. And you and your team as presidency made it possible that we very quickly granted temporary protection. That is access to the labor market, to the education system, to the social security system. All this thanks to the French presidency. I thank you personally for the enormous progress that we have made in the European Green Deal, and here specifically the huge package of Fit for 55. Dozens of proposals have now been pushed forward, and this is a real step forward. The same goes, and I know this is very close to your heart, the DSA and the DMA, so the getting an order into the online world as well as we have it in the offline world to protect our citizens and to keep up the competitiveness of our businesses in the online world. This has been the DSA and DMA negotiated with ambition and adopted in record time, really delivered. There was the conference on the future of Europe, but I'm personally very proud on one specific file that you have concluded in the French presidency, and this is women on board. It took 10 long years. It was stuck for 10 years. And the French presidency made it possible that it reappeared and was negotiated and adopted in record time. So not only did you finish an injustice for women, but also an enormous loss of earnings for companies. It's a real big step forward that we have now this agreement on women on board. Last but not least, and I want not miss to mention it, we have made good progress on the Pact on Migration and Asylum, especially on the voluntary solidarity mechanism and on the governance of Schengen. Important files were difficult to manage. You really pushed it forward. And I stop here, but as you can see, dear Emmanuel, I think France can be very proud of this presidency. It was outstanding, and many thanks for that.
Merci beaucoup. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. President, thank you very much, President, Madam President. A lot has been said, and I won't go over this morning's debate. I think the conclusions are clear, and the President of the Council and the President of the Commission have set out exactly what the debate was all about, to try and find a response to energy issues, and more broadly, the issue that we're all living through at the moment, the sudden return of inflation, monetary policy on the two sides of the ocean, and also signs of slowing economic activity. And we're all called upon by that situation to take decisions. Energy has been mentioned. We need to think about what we can do to make Europe stronger, to show more solidarity in financial issues too. I just wanted to say one thing in response to what President Michel was saying before. He talked about the European political community. We had a debate on that yesterday after the press conference that we held, and it gave me an opportunity to get a clearer idea of this and to garner some consensus around the table. Now, this is not something, it's not a process to replace enlargement, not at all. But I think we all saw that there was a need for a European political framework to deal with strategic issues. And we saw that enlargement, because of its pace and how long it takes, does not do everything that we need to do in Europe. So we want this new approach to include everybody from Ukraine to Iceland, to bring together partners on issues like defence and security, energy, infrastructure, health crises, economic solidarity, to talk about these key issues. And that's all got to be prepared, and we've decided that the first meeting will take place in the Czech Republic under the incoming presidency with all our partners, the idea being to have a partnership between equals, and then we'll put flesh on the bones as we go along, given that it's got clear benefits for us all. I also want to come back to something that was mentioned yesterday, but what happened this morning has shown how topical this is. It's about the accession negotiations for North Macedonia and Albania. And we had I called for the vote in the Bulgarian parliament for the lifting of the Bulgarian veto regarding the North Macedonian accession negotiations, which helps Albania as well. So we'll continue with this. We've got a negotiation with our Bulgarian, North Macedonian counterparts to sort that agreement over the next few days, and everybody's prepared to get all that formalised. I'd like to thank the Bulgarian Prime Minister, coalition partners, opposition parties who actually voted that through. And congratulations to North Macedonia on the progress. There's work still to be done, but that's important progress nonetheless. I'd also like to thank President von der Leyen for taking stock of the last 6 months. This gives me an opportunity to say that all this progress, and I'll mention some things specifically, but this would not have been possible without all the hard work of President Michel and President von der Leyen and their services, and all the European Parliament that worked flat out. The institutions have worked together, and during the 6-month period have been able to take action. We have to all recognise with a great deal of humility that Europe in June 2020 is very different from the one 2022 is very different from the Europe of January 2022, and we've all had to pull together. This has been made necessary because of Russia's decision to launch a war, and we've actually been able to come up with some very important decisions for the future of our continent. We've imposed sanctions, 6 packages, the first package in a couple of days, and that had seemed unimaginable 6 months ago. I think no one would have imagined that this could happen, not even us three, that we would sanction 90% of Russian oil. We've got provide a lot of macroeconomic support to Ukraine, defence support. We activated the European Peace Facility. We also showed that we are actually in a position to help a country that faces war, to defend our values, and that's in addition to all bilateral support. So we've provided this financial and macroeconomic support in addition to reception of refugees. We've done a lot to try and integrate them onto labour markets, as you were saying, and to help those countries that were the so-called front line member states, Poland, Slovakia, Romania, etc. Now, in that context, we've been able to round things off with decisions taken yesterday with a strong message for Ukraine and Moldova and prospects also for Georgia. So I think, our agenda has been actually very much in line with the geopolitical changes that we've seen. We didn't see the war arrive, and we had to massively take decisions to deal with that. But all it's served to do is really reinforce our views that we need more sovereignty in Europe, more than ever. And this might have seemed like a far-fetched idea from France a few years ago, and we've actually managed to have a convergence of views around it. I think we've all seen how important sovereignty is: defence sovereignty, technology sovereignty, energy sovereignty. This crisis has sped things up. It's really accelerated our collective agenda. We've been able to make progress on a number of files over the last 6 months. We were able to adopt at Council various things to fight climate change, also at the Parliament, the CBAM, also fighting deforestation. When it comes to imports, we're working very hard so that all member states can adopt texts that will allow us to reduce emissions by 55% by 2030. So on a lot of these topics, let me thank all the institutions for the vast amount of work done. We're not far from being able to round off absolutely everything. So we'll be working over the last few days of our presidency technically and negotiating on, in terms of Europe, a social Europe. We've made good on our undertakings. We've made big steps on minimum wages so that European workers can work in decent conditions and ending this race to the bottom, working for seconded workers. I'd also like to thank the Portuguese presidency, the social summit. We got rid of all the misunderstandings. We overcame the various differences of models so that we could finalise that text. And then I also want to say just how pleased we are, and Madam President, you talked about this. We finally managed to achieve this milestone when it comes to gender equality and female representation on management boards of companies. That had been stuck for 10 years. So with new coalitions, we've been able to make progress there. On the digital giants, regulating those, we've been able to make strong progress there. 2 European laws, DSA, DMA, that will allow us to regulate the hyper-concentration among players and to regulate content. That was new. We're the first region to do this. We had a general regulation to protect personal data. This is now a step forward. We're not yet at the end of this, but we are pleased that we've made progress on these 2 directives. But let's be humble. Let's show humility. We're not yet there. We've started to impose the right to competition on these giants, and also removing terrorist content, etc. Sovereignty on our borders, we've made progress on Schengen reform, unprecedented progress there when it comes to European asylum and migration policy, because together we decided to go for the step-by-step approach, the gradual approach. We had a very ambitious package from the Commission, and I strongly support it, but we've been able to make progress on a lot of issues because we plumped for a step-by-step approach. That allows us better to screen entries, to bolster reception, to allow for freedom of movement. That's very important. Defence, this idea of a strategic roadmap for the next 10 years, and then a commitment entered into in Versailles to improve investment in defence capabilities. That's also historic progress, and that picks up on work started on the strategic compass by the German presidency. So we've really going to come back in Madrid at the NATO summit to defend that. Now in Versailles, we talked about reducing our dependence on fossil fuels and to diversify sources of supply to reduce our dependence. We've made these first choices, first options, and then economic instruments to protect our public markets, aggressive in terms, faced with aggression on that front, and kind of responsible capitalism is what we've plumped for. And then beyond neighbourhood issues and the progress made there, and that we came back to yesterday, the partnership with Africa has marked the last 6 months, and then the summit that we had with the African Union in February with all our partners has allowed us to build a renewed method on very important issues which have been proved to be important over time: food security, protein strategy, and also a lot of issues when it comes to financing. And then finally, Europe would not be a power if it didn't listen to its citizens. The COF, the Conference on the Future of Europe, that was started a while back, this 9th of May was when it was all kicked off, and then you know that France is in favour of a protective, bold Europe, We've had a first exchange on the outcomes of that, and that will be continued in the European Council. So that's what I wanted to say, just how we've been able to react quickly and with strength to the return of war on European soil, but at the same time, we've been able to pursue our agenda. We've consolidated what we've been doing, and I think we've been able to show that our agenda is in line with the broader geopolitical context. And I'd like to thank at the end by thanking all the institutions and also the French teams in Brussels and in Paris for the huge amount of work they've done. I mean, you've extended words of gratitude to me, but I'm just front of house, if you will. It's not just me. There's an awful lot of work done by ministers and their teams and the permanent representations. Lots of people, Élysée Matignon back in Paris. So I'd like to thank all the people on the French side for the excellent work and commitment. And in a few days' time, we will pass on the baton. Those last few days are going to be very busy days. But the baton will be passed on to the Czech presidency, and I'd like to give the Czech Republic and their Prime Minister wish them the best of luck, and then at the summit in Madrid I'll be able to pass on the baton more formally. I'm really pleased that we've been able to make progress on all these topics and build a stronger Europe, and it's been really wonderful to work alongside you, Charles and Ursula.
Thank you, President. We've got quite a lot of French press with us, obviously. I will give the floor first of all to Mathieu Question, TFN.
C'est rare de...
Jérôme? Bon, il faut choisir.
We're going to choose. I have a question about gas. You talked about emergency measures in July. Do you have any information whereby Russia might turn off the tap totally in the coming days or weeks? The measures which are being prepared, will they have an impact on business and even private households, as Germany is thinking now? And for France, are you sure that you will be able to do without Russian gas altogether by the winter?
We have seen the pattern not only of the last weeks and months, but looking back in hindsight, also the pattern of last year. When you look at Gazprom's filling the storage, or I should say non-filling the storage, because last year they were at a 10 years low in non-filling the gas storage. And then, of course, I don't have to tell you, by now it's 12 member states that either have been totally cut off the Russian gas or partially. And therefore, the best is always hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That's what we're doing right now. Actually, we have not started now, but we started already at the beginning of the year, a time where we saw the increasing threats coming from Russia. And we have not only prepared by going deep diving into tailoring sanctions, but also into working on the energy union from the perspective of gas reduction from Russia. And therefore, this is an intensive work that has as an aim that we do not have with Russian gas cuts national measures that only look at the national market, and thus could have very bad influence on neighboring markets or the single market itself, but to look into potential curtailment or smart energy-saving measures for the whole European Union and the whole single market. It's small things, but for example, if in a national measure you reduce the production of spare part, it might not have an effect in your member state, but it might have a heavy effect on the member state where the whole product is finalized. And therefore, it is so important that we have a real overview about the situation in the European Union and detailed preparedness on potential measures that we have to take. Last sentence on that. Of course, this is also including the work on, I would call it, energy solidarity. So we have energy from different sources. I've been explaining a few. What we see is that the general trend is we're getting rid of the Russian fossil fuels, and the whole supply moves more towards the global south. And our reliable friends like the United States or, for example, in the East, And for us, it's important that the overall network of interconnectors, for example, and pipelines in the European Union is fit for purpose, that you can have flows in any direction where, for example, the gas is needed. That's the work we're doing right now.
Pour ce qui est de la France,
as far as France is concerned, the Prime Minister and Minister in charge of Energy have explained the strategy and indeed have given visibility to the fact that we won't have a problem. France doesn't really depend much on gas, as you know, and even less on Russian gas, and we put together a strategy to diversify. But this approach is to a certain extent limited because, you know, the market is integrated, as we just heard. So whether it's gas itself or electricity, the market is still integrated and interdependent. So if there was a strategy to cut off altogether Russian gas, the difficulty would be felt strongly in a number of member states, which is why, indeed, we need a European strategy, likewise for electricity. And we need it because, depending on the day, France exports or imports electricity. Depends on our needs, our production capacity at a given moment. So it's very important for obvious reasons that we need a market that functions, and that's why we need a strategy to diversify where we import gas from. And that's the policy we're pursuing. I mean, defend very much European coordination, even more strongly, work together with colleagues. So we need to accelerate the transition to reduce the share of gas in electricity generation that's consistent with Fit for 55, and it's the best policy for the short and mid-term. Giovanni.
Giovanni Del Re.
Giovanni Del Re pour le quotidien italien Avvenire. Alors, en parlant de l'énergie.
Well, on energy, I'd like to know whether you also talked about the price cap, and in particular, Madam President von der Leyen, you received mandate from the last European Council to explore the option of a price cap. So I'd like to know, when are you going to get back to us on that? Is it going to be part of a plan you've announced for July? And you were going to present it to the leaders, you said, Madam President, which means, is there likely to be a new meeting of the summit in July to talk about it?
We have also discussed those topics. In the Council conclusions, you find the remarks on that. Indeed, there has been a tasking in the last Council. We are working on it. We are working on different models, not only to look into how to curb the energy prices or electricity prices, but also to look at the market design with the question, is the market design we have today still fit for purpose? As you know, the market design today is a lot of renewable energy and other energy sources come into the market. The last one entering the market is gas, and gas is defining the whole price. Thus, you have enormous prices overall, while, for example, renewables are really cheap, are cost-effective, and this was designed for a time where we wanted the renewables 20 years ago to come into the market, and the market was dominated by fossil fuels at an okay-ish price level. Now this picture has completely changed, and therefore the tasking for the Commission to work on alternative market designs that would potentially also include the decoupling of the gas from the formation of the market price. We have agreed that we will discuss that at the next regular European Council that is typically, if I'm not mistaken, in October. So round about till the end of the summer, we should be ready to come with different proposals, options to the leaders to discuss that.
I'd just like to add that indeed we did have an opportunity to talk about all these subjects, and the conclusions make the link with work by international partners, which is important on a subject like this. And debate also has highlighted what many have said around the table: we need to move faster to act together in the case of joint purchases of energy, and to act together also in terms of energy storage. And as you know, some spoke up to encourage us to take another look at the electricity market and particularly regards the impact of the price of gas on the price of electricity. So confidence was expressed in the Commission to continue its work and also in the Council, French and Czech presidencies, therefore, who will be responsible for coordinating the actions of the Member States. Regards the next European Council, we are intending to have that debate around about October. No decision has been taken at this stage regards convening the European Council earlier, but as was the case, we follow the situation, we keep an eye on developments. The various institutions and ministerial councils will be motivated under the direction of the heads of state and government. Virginie, Marinque, du Monde.
Oui, bonjour, j'ai plusieurs questions.
I have a number of questions. The German government is fragile at present, Mario Draghi's government too. In France, we don't yet realise what the consequence will be of the parliamentary elections. It's for you, sir. Are we like to suffer from a lack of leadership in Western Europe, therefore, at a time when this could be a problem on gas? To you, Madam von der Leyen, you talked about diversification. About 50 billion cubic metres of gas have been imported. Now, with regards to what we agreed with the US and Israel, how many billion cubic metres of gas can we expect to get from these countries to replace Russian gas? Then on minimum corporate tax, still a blockage from Hungary. Have you talked about with Viktor Orban? Are you expecting to do this by the end of the month? You said that you'd try and free it up by the end of French presidency. Where are we on that? Thank you very much. On the third question, your diagnosis is right. Yes, Hungary is blocking things. We did talk about it with Viktor Orban. And we will do everything we can, Europeans and non-Europeans, because, you know, it's an agreement which involves a broader platform where many want to see Europe move, because, you know, it depends also on the American agenda and others who signed up to this internationally. So we'll be doing as much as we can to free up the situation and get past what is currently a Hungarian veto, which is the only outstanding blockage, whereas the other issues have been carried out of the states. So we'll do the best we can. Let me be stoical on this. You know, if it doesn't depend on yourself, you can commit yourself reasonably, but no further. So I can commit myself reasonably on your first question. You cannot, while at the same time, take the view that Europe has to be strong and democratic and deplore the fact that most of the governments and parliaments reflect the democratic liveliness of our countries. I've sometimes been criticised for having too much power and too clear majorities. Well, France now finds itself in a parliamentary situation, which it has, moreover, seen back in 1988, more or less the same. But, you know, in European terms, this is quite commonplace. If you look at all the member states, there are 20 of them who have coalition governments. Some have as many as 5, 6, 7 partners in the coalition. Others have to govern in a minority. So I don't for one second believe that that's an issue. I know in our countries, leaders see there are differences of view. Extreme views are rising, but you have to try and build compromises to convince everybody as much as you can and to have a constructive majority. Now, you mentioned two of my fellow leaders, Italy and Germany. It's what they're doing. Well, it's what we'll be doing in France. We'll be doing it too. Together with other parties in government, we have to try and build coalitions or agreements on given text to try and make progress on a clear agenda. So Europe has leadership, but I think all of us, we have to be vigilant. We should not oppose the leadership which democracy itself represents, because I can give you, you know, clearer forms of leadership which are not democratic, unlike us. And these models are not ours. And we saw this when we were managing the health crisis, which required urgent, strong decisions to be taken. Many countries took decisions outside of democracy, and they found themselves in worse trouble than ourselves. Now, sometimes democracy takes time to get there, but it does make progress. So our countries are complex in their political life. On the contrary, well, I think it actually strengthens European leadership. It gives us more work for us to do because we have to reconcile different positions. We have to bring about a convergence in our own countries, build our own compromises. At the same time, we have to build these compromises at European level. That's what we're doing, wholeheartedly, with determination and optimism.
Question on the gas deliveries. Indeed, if we look at last year, it's 150 BCM of Russian gas that would have to be replaced. And you know the three different approaches that we have. It's diversification. I'll come back to that in a moment. It is energy savings, and it's the investment in renewables or replacement by renewables, the preferred energy source. What the diversification is concerned, you may recall that I had an agreement with the American President Joe Biden on increased LNG deliveries to the European Union in the first year, this year, an additional 15 BCM. Here the good news is, this is all LNG short contracts, the good news is 2/3 has already been contracted. So the companies in the European Union have already taken the opportunity to take this additional offer. In the following years, it will be 50 BCM per year additionally on top of that. These are figures I know from the top of my head, but from the other sources I was mentioning, Norway up 15%, Azerbaijan an increase by 90%. I know that Algeria has increased the supply. So they've all also understood that this is a perfect business opportunity to gain a new, very important client over time and to go into the vacuum that Russia is now leaving. Then the second topic, if you look at the 150 BCM, we should not only replace it gas by gas, but also always take the opportunity of the energy saving. I cannot emphasize that enough. I'll give you an example. If we overall in the European Union reduce the heating temperature that we have day and night sometimes running by only 2 degrees, or air conditioning would be up 2 degrees, we can save the whole deliveries of Nord Stream 1. So there is a lot of potential in that, and experts can tell you many, many different details where we just lose the energy. And the third point is indeed renewables. Here too, we have just had the wind summit with 4 member states, where they agreed to develop a offshore wind farm together, the 4. And if when this delivers, it is able to cover the whole energy consumption of 50 million households in the European Union. So that's where the music plays. And therefore, the 150 BCM, yes, today it's quite a task to replace that. But if we look wider than only gas by gas, then we also see where the path is going. I want to add one point. For all these things, we need the joint purchase platform. We had decided on it 4 weeks ago. It is up and running since 2 weeks now, and this is where the member states, together with the European Commission, are dealing with the different suppliers.
Thank you, Madam President. If you allow me, Sam, you had another question.
Sam Fleming from the Financial Times. A question to all 3 presidents, if I could. There's been a lot of discussion between the EU and its partners, including the US, about the idea of a cap on oil prices, so not gas but oil prices, as a way of driving down Russia's oil revenues. The Biden administration is clearly very keen on this idea. Do you sense any momentum in this idea as we go into the G7 meetings, and do you think you'd be able to get enough other countries around the world on board for an oil price cap to work? Thank you.
No, I can confirm that we will participate next week in the G7 meeting. I can confirm that this will be a topic on the agenda of the G7 meeting, and we'll see what are the positive advantages of such a possible proposal. But we need also to take everything into account in order to make sure that we have a clear vision about the possible collateral effects. And that's why it requires a lot of very precise efforts in order to be certain that first we are on the same page, and second, that we are convinced that this idea is appropriate in order to reach our common goals.
Yes, so you are aware that if we look at the Russian oil to the European Union, we are in the phase of winding down. Till the end of the year, 90%, which is a lot. But of course, this does not exclude that we are not constructively discussing with the United States at G7, listening to their proposals. And I can only underline, whatever we decide, we need a broad coalition to come together, not only looking at the European Union, but of course at other countries globally. And this will be discussed at G7, certainly.
On va terminer avec Anne.
Anne Revon for the last question.
Merci. Oui, Anne Revon.
Anne Revon from Figaro. 2 questions. 2 or 3 maybe, quick ones. The European political community, the first one. How do you see things? You were talking about a meeting under the Czech presidency. Now, I can imagine that the Western Balkan countries will be there. You might think that Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia will be represented. But what about the other countries? Have you thought who you'll be inviting? That's the first question. Secondly, on the political situation in France. Now, you said before, a few minutes ago, that at the end of the day, that things are settling down, getting back to normal, that there are no taboos, then that must mean, in terms of your counterparts. Have you talked about this with some of your counterparts who know how difficult it can be to build majorities, etc.? And then a question for you, Ms. van der Leyen and Charles Michel. Do you feel that the political situation in France could actually slow things down in Europe? Now, I have a great deal of confidence and optimism. I think that's been said. And you know, I've got experiences of a country that's not the simplest one in terms of how democracy and representation. And I think we've been able to see over the last few months just how much leadership we have in Europe. We've remained united. The French presidency has been a clear success. Despite the difficult circumstances, we've been able to accelerate our agenda when it comes to strategic autonomy and sovereignty. We've been able to identify what our common interests are and what we're keen to work on together. There are issues which are actually quite national in nature, energy, security, defence, quite national in nature, but we've made progress on them in recent months. So there's a great deal of confidence there, trust there. Obviously, we've got certain things that we have to take into account, institutional realities, political sensitivity, the role of civil society. We have these political systems which guarantee the citizens' confidence. We have to go out and win hearts and minds. It requires a lot of effort, and I think I'm very confident that with our national democracies, our member states, the EU is going to be able to live up to the challenges which it faces.
We can, in Europe, rely on France as one of our founding members. And I know by personal experience that with the French president, we do not only have a true French, but also a true and convinced European.
Sur vos 2 questions.
Now, on your 2 questions for me, the second, well, yes, we spend a lot of time talking with our colleagues about political models and what we do. That's on an ongoing basis with the main partners. They follow politics in our country, I follow theirs. Now, we don't always have the same political culture. There are different structures, and in spite of all that, now we have a relative majority in the French Parliament at the moment, but that's actually quite a a big one when you look at countries which have a more proportional system. In Germany, 3 partners at the moment. So all this shows that systems are very different, but we draw inspiration from one another. And in our debates, I'm often struck domestically. France knows how to make compromises. That's what we do all the time. We spend time trying to find solutions with people that have different views, different priorities. If we can, do that here, why can't we do that in France too? If you've got people in France that want to defend the Republic and develop the country. So I've got confidence in people that have those objectives in mind. Now, but obviously the model is different depending on which country you're talking about. Now, on the European political community, we're going to try and be straightforward about this. We're going to do the opposite of what hasn't worked before, that you set up structures, entities before you really know what you want to achieve with them. So strategic intuition, if you will. Very much. Thank you.
Oui, Mathieu Coche, il a perdu.